Alright, so Elizabeth Warren has come out recently saying she wants to criminalize disinformation on elections. Now, I'm going to be very fair to Elizabeth Warren here for just a moment, even though I do disagree with her, and I'll get to that in a second. But just to clear some things up that I've seen specifically on Fox News and on Twitter, people have been saying she's advocating for the banning of memes and opinions, which is not true, although I still think it's fair to bring that up, and I'll get to that in a second too. But in all fairness to Elizabeth Warren, her plan, from what I've read, is only banning disinformation on where, how, and when to vote. So you wouldn't be allowed to knowingly tell someone a falsehood, like being able to text some random phone number in order to vote. Now, I think it's fair to point out that there is disinformation about what Warren is proposing. However, here's the thing. It took me about 2 seconds to look it up. I saw some headlines saying she wants to criminalize opinions. I said to myself, that is some 1984 Ministry of Truth stuff right there. So I looked into it at about 1:15 p.m. today, and by about 1:17 p.m. today, I cleared it up. So that's just a small example of why I think this law isn't even necessary, but I also think that this proposed law is quite frightening, not because of what's in it necessarily, but what it may eventually cause. If she ever got something like this through, you would have to be blind, ignorant, and naive to an extraordinary level to believe that their next step wouldn't be to try and ban or limit opinions that they feel are wrong and that they want to suppress. I don't believe for a minute that Elizabeth Warren would shed a tear or let alone ever fight for me if I had my voice taken away, or Stephen Crowder or Styx Hexenhammer or Thomas Woods or you name it. She wouldn't care. In fact, I'm sure she'd be quite happy to see them deplatformed or silenced. If she so believes that misinformation needs to be made criminal on when, where, and how to vote, then making it criminal to influence who people vote for is not a very long leap away from that. My stance on the war on drugs, after all, could be misconstrued by politicians, and they may claim that I'm guilty of expressing an opinion that would lead to everyone voting for politicians that would allow for everyone and their children to shoot up some heroin. My stance on gun control could be warped by politicians, and they could easily say, in fact they very often do say, that those who oppose gun control are partially responsible for the deaths we see by guns. What are you going to do when someone like Elizabeth Warren gets her foot into that door and starts pushing? Now, I do have to say this, because that libertarian part of my brain, which is pretty much the whole thing, won't shut up about it. And that's that the funny thing about all this is that Elizabeth Warren is essentially saying, hey, you can't say anything that might mislead people and prevent them from voting. Okay, but I can't help but think, vote for what? Prevent people from voting for the 2 pieces of garbage they're presented with? There's far worse things in this world. It's just a funny reminder that people still actually think there is a substantive difference between Democrats or Republicans. There are differences for sure, but they're negligible. No one wants to do anything about the war on drugs, military-industrial complex, the Federal Reserve, and the national debt, and so on and so forth. So don't give me this stuff that somehow your ability to vote for either politician A or politician B is sacrosanct. It's just not. And here's another interesting thing to point out. You remember the Afghanistan papers that came out just a bit ago about the public being outright lied to about what we were up to in Afghanistan? About how we had no direction, no goals, yet we were told, hey, we're doing great and we're getting things done and the mission is being accomplished. Or about how even the military was purposefully wasting money to make it look like taxpayer funding for the war needed to continue. If you want to criminalize disinformation, okay, but that law better start and stop at the government. Who is going to jail for lying about a war effort that caused the death of innocent people? I haven't heard of anybody going to jail, and there probably should be someone going to jail. Because there is no entity on the face of this planet that has caused more death, destruction, chaos, mayhem, and nonsense than the government and their dishonesty. But notice, no one is advocating for politicians to be thrown into jail for causing real, true destruction through their dishonesty. Lies are exposed all the time. The DNC rigged the election against Bernie Sanders. Elizabeth Warren herself lied about her ancestry in order to get people to think a certain way about her. She lied about her son going to private school, again, to get people to think a certain way about her. She likely lied about Bernie Sanders and his supposed comment about a woman not being able to be president, which, say what you will about Bernie Sanders, and I have said plenty, it makes no sense to suggest that Bernie Sanders would say something like that. So, hey, Elizabeth Warren, you fabricate nonsense in an effort to change the political landscape of the country all the time. You want a law like this to go through, and you want to go down a path like this? Okay, but be careful, because dare I say it, you would be the first in line to be going to prison. But that's all for now. Like and subscribe. It's a huge help, and I'm actually going to be gone for a week. I'll be back next weekend. But in the meantime, you take it easy.